Hello my brothers and sisters of the Order, welcome back to the Order, and welcome back to a Black History Month video. And today, y'all, we are actually going to be talking about none other than Eugene Bullard, or he's also infamously known as the first black pilot in history. Or as the Germans love to call him, the Black Swallow of Death. And in such, I had to put this out here. The story of Eugene Bullard has been what we might call a forgotten one, yet a more idealized, well, re-spoken tale in modern stories. Eugene Bullard was born on October 9th of 1895 in Columbus, Georgia. It was stated that he was one of the 7th of 10 children. Eugene was inspired by tales of France from his father, mainly from the fact of this said civil rights union, and in such, in the major forms that even blacks were even treated as equals as whites were in France. It was stated that he had endured many forms of racial segregation in his home state of Georgia, and at age 11 he would later on stated to have actually ran away from home. While making his way towards France, Eugene was stated to have taken hard-working jobs in order to reach his goal. But yet, he wasn't able to meet this until 1912, when he was stowed away on a German freighter, and it was only in London when he performed a slapstick routine while he was training with Dixie Kid, which Dixie Kid was actually a famous boxer at the time. And in such, this is actually where we can understand how this infamous story goes around. It was later stated that the infamous Dixie Kid actually even arranged Bullard's own type of fight in Paris, where he was later on noticed by many boxing fans as an extreme hit wonder. And for 2 years, it's actually stated that Eugene Bullard would actually become a famous boxer. That would be until World War I would strike out. Eugene was later stated to have joined the French Foreign Legion of the 170th Infantry Regiment. He had actually fought in many battles with the French military forces, and in such proved his valor amongst the French military, earning himself more than one form of medal in his heroic stand. It's actually stated, though, that on March 1916, Eugene was badly wounded during a battle at the Verdun, and in such, he was stated to have learned to fly on a bet while recuperating. In other words, somebody bet that he wouldn't be able to learn how to fly. They were extremely wrong. And it was stated that on October 2nd of 1916, he was later stated to have joined the French Air Service, mainly as a gunner, and in 1916 joined a group of 38 American pilots, of which we can actually see in the movie Flyboys, which talks about this heroic stand of these American soldiers, in which many of these Americans were just looking for fame, fortune, or to get out of said problems in their own town. It's actually stated that Eugene actually impressed many of these men. One of them was actually from here in Texas, who actually formed a deep bond and friendship with him. He even proved wrong of many other type of, well, said racial segregation of that said American idealism. And it was then stated that in May of 1917 became a full-fledged fighter. While fighting in the French military air force, it's actually stated that Bullard would actually keep fighting into the end of the war, yet he would not be allowed to join the United States military air force service, mainly because of racial segregation. However, that didn't stop him from fighting for the French, and as such, it's stated that they took down at least 20 to 30 German fighters and at least 5 to 10 German bombers in his entire form of air pilot service. And as such, he had gained such reputation amongst the French military that he had even earned the French Croix de Guerre, or in this case, the French Medal of Honor. And it's also stated, though, he was even shot down only once, but he stated that he will be back to actually finish the job with that German the second time he gets able to fly. But in such, the really amazing thing about this man is that I have to put this out here. He had actually been what you might call a major inspiration for the later on Red Tails, one of which were inspired by this heroic figure. It's actually stated that when he actually flew, he had flown with no parachute, no seatbelt whatsoever in the biplane, of which this is actually true. World War I biplanes had no seatbelts, nor could one actually wear a parachute in this design of, well, structure. Meaning, when he got shot down, he went down with his airplane. However, The really impressive part was the way he landed. And such, he had no wheels to actually land his plane, which were shot when it came to the said German pilot. However, the German pilot was stated to have actually been so impressed that he would later on actually escort Eugene until he would crash, later observing whether or not he had survived. The German pilot was stated to have actually saluted Eugene while making his way back home towards his German lines. Eugene would actually even receive a letter by none other than the said German pilot, who in which stated the following, that he was more than impressed about his heroic stand against him, and as such, was mighty impressed beyond measure. It was actually stated that these two actually formed what you might call a bond of enemy-like friendship against each other. And it stated that this German officer would later on actually write a book about Eugene in Germany. However, during World War II and before World War II, it's actually stated that Nazi Germany had actually destroyed all the said books about Eugene Bullard during his time in Germany, mainly because of racist segregation and the worst of racist tension that happened in Nazi Germany, for the fact that Germany wanted to become an Aryan pure domination. And in fact, we don't really know what happened to the German pilot. All that we do know is that it did not probably end well for him at the time. After World War I, Eugene Bullard still stayed in France, and as such, he actually still stayed to become, well, a famous French boxer. In fact, he had gained such reputation in France that he was known to become, well, France's heavyweight champion, even defeating an Italian bloke that which was twice his weight. And such, Eugene was actually stated to have actually landed a 1-2 quick punches, and as such, defeat him in a matter of minutes. However, in 1940, it was actually stated that Eugene was actually later called back into action. But in such, he would actually stated to have left behind everything he owned in France. And pretty much with the capture of France, he even stated that the damn Krauts have taken my damn belts. Simply meaning they took his, his championship belts. In fact, Eugene would later on state the following, that he would not wear a belt until he got them back. Though I don't know if that one was true or not, so we don't know. In fact, it's actually later stated that Eugene even tried to actually join the British Air Service, or in this case, the Royal Air Force. Problem is, due to racial segregation even there in Britain, and the fact that many French military forces were not exactly allowed to actually join the British military, due to the fact of the said Vichy French government, in which allied itself with Nazi Germany. So, in fact, pretty much of the entirety of the British military could not take the chance. In doing so, Bullard was later stated to have actually fled to the United States, where he even tried to serve with the United States military. However, due to segregation again, he was not allowed to actually join the United States Air Force. However, because of his heroic daring achievements during World War I, he would later inspire the infamous Red Tails to join the fight. And as such, this would later on inspire many blacks to actually join the said military, because he had gone above and beyond to actually fight for his country, even though he was hundreds of miles away. It's actually stated that Eugene Bullard even met with the remaining 38 members of the said, Air Force forces, none of which survived, even meeting with our old Texas boy here in Texas. It's later stated that after World War II, Eugene would later on actually be part of the U.S. mail service in the air. In other words, he would still fly for the U.S. mail service even long after he would actually be stated to be, no longer useful for flying. Yet, he proved them wrong. He would keep flying until 1953 when he retired. He was later interviewed in 1959 on NBC's Today Show, and as such, he actually showed off all his medals, that of which he had won. And in 1954, he had actually gone to none other than the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers in Paris, where he was actually highly recognized as a hero. It would also be that in the 1950s he took part in the Civil Rights Movement, and also in the early 1960s. He would actually become an infamous type figure who was accidentally arrested for causing no form of charge. The said officer in question would later on be removed from his said service. And in fact, Eugene Bullard would actually be known as a recognized hero. In fact, none other than Dwight D. Eisenhower himself even stated the following, that if we had more heroic pilots just like him, we would have won the war a lot more quickly. However, it's actually later stated that none other than Eugene Bullard would later die on October 12, 1961 in New York City due to stomach cancer. He died at the age of 66 years old. To this day, you can actually still see an infamous statue of him at the said Museum of Aviation in Robins Air Force Base in Georgia. And as well, there is also an area where we can actually see him in the memoirs of his heroic stand, even his heroic medals. It was later stated that in 2014, he was actually given Heroic Medal of Honor for his heroic service during World War I. And as such, he is still one of my favorite of any Air Force pilot of World War I, mainly because the fact is, he had actually proven himself that you don't actually have to be a white man or a black man. You just have to be a true patriot in order to fight. To this day, people will actually say that the Tuskegee Airmen are the first black pilots, but in such, no, they are not. The original said black pilot is none other than Eugene Bullard, who was stated to have actually downed more planes than any other pilot in their reputation during that short years of 1917 to 1918. And as such, the Germans had high honor for him, and even gave him the heroic nickname of the Black Swallow of Death, which kind of actually is a little honorable if you think about it, because the Germans were stated to have honored their opponents, which they highly admired as heroic soldiers with an infamous name, and as such, more than half of them have actually been seen. This can also be seen with the infamous Harlem Hellfighters, which hopefully y'all can actually see very soon. Anyways guys, hopefully you like this video, like and subscribe for more, as well y'all, hopefully see y'all in the next, Black History Month video. Anyways, I have been Celtic Templar. Hopefully see y'all in the next one. Have a great day.